without further ado, I'd like to invite the first speaker of the affirming team.
We believe in a country in which we promote tall poppy syndrome. We believe in a country in which we tell our kids that you cannot be successful. We tell our kids that there's no point in trying. We believe that is a world which New Zealanders cannot be successful. That is a world which we do not support. That is a world which we all feel rather bad. Three things to do for you in my speech today. One, a point about setup, then on to my two substantive points. One, about how we reduce Kiwis' opportunities to be successful and to fulfill their ambition. And then secondly, how we put down and we repress other cultures that don't share these similar viewpoints. First, the point about setup. Where do we believe this narrative comes from? Why do we believe it's unique to New Zealand? Why do we believe it's something that New Zealand really has? We believe it essentially comes from our early colonial history. We believe it looks like the sailors in Russell and the whalers there. They were really drunken and really like informality. Formality was nothing on the priority list. They could not care less about it. Secondly, we believe it looks like an early farming culture in which you had to leave things to the weather, leave things to fate. You had to go with the punches, so you're quite laid back with that. And then secondly, it looks like not a lot of people in a colony. It's quite a small colony, rather small there, so you never really needed this formality. We believe over time as people have come to New Zealand, this culture has developed, this culture has grown, and people have adapted towards it. Secondly, how do you think this narrative manifests? What does it look like? It looks like, for example, telling someone to chill out when they're really passionate about something, say for example, in a debate, or working really hard at something as well. It looks like calling them a try-hard, it looks like putting them down, it looks like trying to tell them essentially, either directly or indirectly, that you shouldn't be working as hard or you shouldn't be caring about this. It's quite not that deep. And then secondly, what does it not look like? It looks like, therefore, not wanting to get up early and go to work, or like working overtime, or working an extra hour on a project. It's not these things. That's exactly not what it looks like. Okay, on to my first substantive point here. How does it reduce Kiwis' opportunity? How do these harmful narratives harm our Kiwis' ambition? In this argument, I'll prove to you that the laid-back culture in New Zealand causes Kiwis to bring themselves and others down for success that they have or they might have. Why is this important? Because we believe there's just an immense scale to this point. We believe that like every kid at some point in their life has had a dream. They've wanted to be something great. We believe that what we do in our culture is we tell them that they shouldn't be trying to do that. How do we prove this? Firstly, we believe that ambition in New Zealand is extremely stigmatized. We believe people find it weird when someone has an ambition just inherently because it's not part of our culture. We believe instead you should be focusing on other things. For example, if you wanted to be Prime Minister, someone would find that weird, someone would find that bizarre, someone would find that you're doing something wrong, or clearly you're doing something unrealistic. We believe as part of that, it leads to quite an informal culture. Due to our informal culture where you believe that you can essentially talk to anyone like in any way that you want to, that you can just give anyone some free and frank advice. Because of that, you'd like tell people, you tell them you should play down your ambition. You tell you that you probably shouldn't be trying to do these things. They're telling you that this ambition is not important. They tell you, and therefore, what are the impacts on that on you as the person with that belief? You just inherently have far less belief in yourself when random strangers in the street are telling you, no, that's not realistic, that is not attainable. You shouldn't be prioritizing these things. You should just be focusing on yourself, trying to like deal with your day-to-day life. We believe secondly, it means that like no one supports you in order to do these things and trying to get to these places. Because again, similarly, they think that it's weird. We believe that in order to be successful and to be achieve high ambition in your life, you must have people that support you. You must have people that give you help. That say, for example, in your effort to be Prime Minister, put you in contact with important or notable or significant people. Say, for example, in a political party. Really, people don't do that in our culture because of these reasons and because they don't have this ambition and because they believe it's wrong for you to have this ambition. And then C, we just also believe that particularly in a corporate structure or particularly in a business, no one will promote you because they believe that your unique ambition, for example, is not okay for the rest of the team. Say, for example, if you believe fervently that you should work longer hours or you should have certain like stricter dress code or stricter formality, they believe that will not be cohesive or conductive for the rest of it, like a team to be led. We believe, therefore, that people don't promote you, for example, in the business world. It is far more difficult for you to get ahead if you have these beliefs. Secondly, a reason why we believe we get this laid-back culture harms us is because we believe other people become inherently just far more jealous because of you. Because if you do get ahead, if you are successful in your ambition and you do feel well, the other people around you are far more likely to feel cheated. Why is this? Because they feel it is unfair. They have felt their entire life that this culture tell them they don't have to work hard. They don't have to do X and do Y to be successful. They don't have to put in the long hours. They don't need to do that. That's not expected of them. But you have had your success through doing exactly that, through working hard and doing these things. Therefore, they feel cheated. They feel that you have almost abused the system. You've tried to do something else. We believe that is something that they do not like you. They try to pull you down. They try to pull you down. Thirdly, we just believe that there are immense harms that come to disadvantaged people as well, particularly. We believe that essentially, similar to the similar outcomes here that we see, that people in the bottom of society who tend to need to work hard, extremely hard, to overcome barriers. They might have to work longer hours, take multiple jobs. They might want to see for themselves, for their children, a life in which they don't have to, when they can go to the best schools, or they don't have to suffer, or they can have like 3 meals on the table every night. These people that want to work really hard to go to all these jobs, they, for example, have to overcome these barriers. But our culture sees these people as being upstarts, as seeing that your ambition is unrealistic. We push these people down. Again, you don't promote these people. So, and then fourthly, we just believe there are informal factors that are otherwise prioritized over just over how well you do. We believe these things, over just your merit, for example. So what are the outcomes we get here? Firstly, we believe there are immense harms that come to you when you have, like, for example, your mental health. Firstly, when you are successful. If you are this ambitious person and you want to be successful, you want to do well in life, we believe that you, for example, are far more likely to be attacked by other people. We see this, for example, in like Jacinda Ardern. A lot of this culture, we believe, contributes to the attack that we saw on Jacinda Ardern. We believe this contributes to, like, say, for example, attacking people that are really successful. It looks like cutting people down when you have this ambition, for example, in school, not celebrating prizes, not celebrating awards. Secondly, we just believe that, like, a lot of young kids don't pick up their ambition. They don't do these things. And then thirdly, we just also believe the outcome is, like, far more wide on people that haven't, like, say, for example, achieved their ambition. We believe they see other people, they are envious of other people and the success that they have had. They feel so much worse about themselves. They just, like, live a life of vitriol and anger towards the system and towards those people as well. Secondly, we just believe there are, like, economics harms there when you, like, just don't work as hard, for example, as well. You're far less efficient, you're far less likely to, like, compete on the world stage. I'll take a point now.
If you were raised in a culture that wasn't that you have an overly formal focus, how do you expect someone to then get ahead and focus on formality?
We don't necessarily, we just think you, like, operate within that culture and you're able to do that in order to get ahead, for example. And actually get onto it now, how we believe that people that have had a formal culture actually do not work in the New Zealand society. And essentially this is my point about how, like, other cultures are put down significantly in our society. So in this argument, particularly focusing on our Maori culture, our culture in New Zealand represses that culture, represses their ability to pursue themselves independently, and also foreign cultures as well. So how do we prove this? Firstly, we characterize Maori culture as being incredibly formal. We believe Maori culture is built on respect, it is built on tradition, it is built on mana. We believe this looks like, particularly in iwi culture and hapu culture, this looks like a pōwhiri when you go to a new place and when you're welcomed onto the marae, for example. It looks like doing a haka, which is showing respect to other people around you. The Maori culture we characterize to you is being built on respect and built on formality. What then happens? We believe that this is eroded. How is this eroded? Firstly, we believe that this informality forces Maori people to adapt if they want to be successful in society. Characterized to you why people believe you must be informal to be successful. And so what this means is that Maori people, if they want to be successful, must change to fit these norms. Others will see it as strange. They don't understand any formality that you have. They don't understand the formality that Maori people have. So you're forced to change. You're forced to say, for example, not suggest can we have a pōwhiri at the start of this conference. For example, you don't change these things. You don't get these benefits. We believe also this happens with this general apathy you get towards other Maori culture from white people towards these things. The outcomes is quite obvious and intuitive that Maori culture is eroded, their independence is eroded, and that is why I am proud to affirm.
This speech and invite the first speaker on the negotiation.
Can I also ask, just when you're asking your POIs, because you're kind of facing that way, you try to just predict your voice as much as possible. So,
Imagine your funds.
True success in life lies in internal fulfillment, and we more efficiently create a New Zealand where individuals can authentically express themselves and connect at a deeper level. A few things in the speech: firstly on setup, secondly on personal life, and then thirdly on work life. Okay, so how does this cultural norm exist within the status quo? One, I think within New Zealand, we are encouraged to find a balance. From a young age, we are taught how to play and learn through play-based learning. We are encouraged to go out and play during lunch times and morning teas, then sitting in a cafeteria where we all sit around a table on chairs. When we grow up, we apply these learned logics to life. We have laws that enforce sick days and time off. But secondly, we have less pressure on appearances. This looks like being able to wear a t-shirt to your work and to your office job, or like being able to reference brain rot in New Zealand schools debating if it helps benefit your point. Note that this representation is taking the easiest way to express an idea, to express a personality. The idea is the same, it is just not restricted. But thirdly, standards are more achievable. We are focused on personal and sustainable goals, such as personal fulfillment, taking time off, having balance within life, rather than setting high, unachievable goals for the sake of outcompeting each other. Fourthly, this cultural norm of this laid backness interacts with other social norms within our society. This looks like pursuing a career, having a happy family, finding a passion, just not being a lazy bum. But also, I think this is it also interacts with things like Māori cultures, where they aren't forced to conform with Western values because we hold Māori culture in a high regard. When you go onto a whare, you recognise the formality that is there, but you also recognise the informality of getting together, having a hangi, having this connection that you might not otherwise get. But also note this, that now we probably have the unique benefit that they are able to exist within these spaces that are widely formal on a Western perspective. New Zealand is held by the Crown, and we follow many British traditions and trends, and this allows for these individuals to exist in these spaces when we don't have to preserve the formality of Western ideas. Okay, note then, they also said, so what is the comparative? 1, you have a high pressure. 2, you have high ambition. Note then, when the norm is also very focused on competition, you now accentuate these, because each time your friend is competitive, they have a high ambition, you are incentivized to be competitive, to outcompete them and have a higher ambition. Note, without the presence of laid back social norms, the comparative has the potential to look like a lot of countries like China and Korea, where there's high pressure and high value placed on the job you have, the school you get into. Note also that because of capitalism, we are still very work focused, to the extent that we are encouraged to get jobs, we are encouraged to pursue passions, we win if we prove we can have 1, a better quality of life, or 2, a better quality of personality and and work, etc. Okay, what does success within a personal life look like? So what do people value? Firstly, identity, being happy of who you are, how you use life, but how you present yourself. But 2, your social life. Humans are innately social creatures. We crave connection. We crave these relationships we make. We crave the happiness you get from laughing in a group of people you love and trust. But thirdly, passion. This doesn't look like having this high ambition or high success. It looks like having a hobby you come home to every night and you take pride in the knitting you do. So why do we get more fulfilled values with laid-back norms? 1, you have less fear of judgment. When you are with this, a group of people and maybe work, you don't feel judged. You don't feel the need to hold up appearances. Is my collar undone? Am I saying something funny? You can afford the ability to make a joke, lighten the mood, and have an overall better environment. But 2, you just have more time. You set yourself limits. You're only going to do so much work. You're not going to now come back and spend hours doing your coursework, looking over your notes 3 times to ensure that you have held up this appearance of being ambitious. You can note then that with this time, you can spend more time with your friends and family, or even just going out into nature or doing your hobbies. But I think thirdly, you get more individuality. When you try to be formal, you fit into a black and white universal idea. However, when you're informal, you can express yourself how you want to be. I think comparatively, you search with in a work environment, you search you pursue what is most highly coveted, things like doctors, things like lawyers, etc., rather than pursuing something that you as an individual might actually enjoy. I think also here that this authenticity and expression of yourself isn't capped by this tall poppy syndrome they asserted was caused by this cultural norm. I think you have tall poppy syndrome when you have everyone battling for the same jobs, battling for the same positions, having a competitive nature, when you cut yourself down. I don't think this stems from the cultural norm of being laid back. I think this stems from wider ideas that there's only so many chances for success or jealousy. I think in the same way, in countries where there is a cultural norm to be ambitious, we still see tall poppy syndrome where people cut each other down because they're jealous. Or your parents tell you maybe you shouldn't pursue being the prime minister of the country because maybe you're actually not that good as a lawyer or as a public speaker, and this actually wouldn't be something that would be good for you to pursue, and the chances of a success there are just unrealistic. I also think they just assert that this happens in New Zealand and Jacinda Ardern was cut down because of this norm and not because she was a woman in politics played by other norms that were forcing her to be success face more scrutiny. I think this is just not in our interest. But also, fourthly, you just create a deeper connection when you remove formal barriers. When you look at, when your teacher doesn't let you call her Miss instead of calling her Miss O'Connolly and only letting you talk when you put your hand up, you now create a deeper connection. You now can have conversations that are more intimate. But also, when you build these connections and foster this, why is this good? Firstly, when you feel more connected to people, you feel like you can express yourself, you feel more authentically you. When you're not living in constant fear of being judged and restricted and the ability to be yourself, this is so impactful because you only live once as you. It's important you're happy with yourself, how you present yourself, that you don't feel restricted by unimportant ideas that don't actually contribute to anything, titles and honorifics, etc. But secondly, I think you just build deeper connections. You have time to connect with people you love, but also there isn't as many barriers to connecting to everyone on this level. This means even surface level discussions, surface level connections become deeper on our side, where you can just remove these formalities and every interaction becomes meaningful. But I also think you now create this balance where if you aren't trying to work to the highest extent of your ability, you aren't burning out when you're prioritizing your health, your well-being, going outside and touching grass. This is so good. This is why the mood shall stand.
I'd like to thank the speaker for this speech and invite up the second speaker.
Normally, I like to do an enjoyable intro because debating is fun, but this debate is serious. It's not the flippancy that they give you. It's not small talk with people. It's not taking away the barrier of having to call your teacher Miss O'Connell. Oh, the horror. No, it's about cultural alienation. It's about a norm that has real effects with real people every day around the world, in how they think, in how they look at others, in what they expect, in what they know. In New Zealand. So, I'm today going to talk to you about three main things. First of all, some of the rather substantive setup and framing that we've got, and second of all, on personal success. Then I'm going to reiterate the extreme cultural harm that this norm does to people who are not Pākehā New Zealanders. Right, let's start with some of the framing and setup they give you. First of all, they tell you that when we have no laid-back culture, we go immediately to some ultra-competitive Japan-like culture. This is simply not true, because even without a laid-back culture, New Zealand doesn't have a lot of the extreme pressure to succeed that is in Japan. I think it's much more likely us being a Western nation with a similar culture to those like the United States of America and the UK, that we shift to a model like theirs, which says if you work hard, you will succeed, and then you will be able to use that money to build a family and have a nice life. And some people are even more ambitious. That is what I would like to call the New Zealand dream, because it's the American dream, but I put our country in front of it. It's pretty clever. So, we don't think that that's what their comparative looks like. I don't think they have given you any mechanism as to why New Zealand suddenly becomes ultra-competitive. I think we simply become like a lot of other countries not noted for being laid back. Right. Then they say that when there's that there'll be less pressure on appearances and just unrestricted ideas. I think, as they said, it's all about how people are expressing the ideas. I think it's unlikely that having the culture that we have in some of these other countries ever stops you from expressing an idea that is truly important to you, because there are many other norms that come into play, like somebody's wanting to be heard, wanting to talk to people, and wanting to get their voice out there. It's simply a pretty basic human motivation, and I don't think doing it in a polite or formal way stops them from doing it or stops them from getting their message across. Right, then we come to what they tell you, which I think is very important, when they tell you that they're talking about things like titles and honorifics. I would like to remind you that titles and honorifics aren't just calling your teacher Miss. They're calling the Māori Queen by her official title. They're giving respect to honourable members of Parliament. They're giving cultural acknowledgement of achievement, respect, mana, and hierarchy status that people have earned, and that is very, very important to people of specific cultures. I'm going to talk more about that later, but that is what we're dealing with on framing. Finally, they just tell you that, people in New Zealand hold other cultures in high regard, especially Māori culture. I think even if they do, this is when it comes into those extremely formal settings like government, when we actually do interact with these things. People don't hold you in high regard if you, do a mihi at the start of every conversation, or if you ask at your workplace, hey, can we do a proper pōwhiri welcome to these people? Because it is an annoyance, and because they have the norm that exists for you, where you have to be laid back and informal. I think more importantly though, this norm just means that people are raised believing that it is right to be laid back and informal, and more importantly, only understanding the idea of being laid back and informal, because that is all they've ever known. What happens when people don't understand something? They dislike it. They fear it. They see it as a threat. And so when people don't understand formality, don't understand the depths to which tradition and respect need to go, that is when they fear it. That is when they worry about it. That is when you have the division in your country where they say, I don't understand these people, I don't like these people, I don't want to engage with their culture. So on their idea of personal success, what do they tell you? Just a bunch of sort of airy-fairy stuff about how you have a nicer life and deeper social connection. One, you still express your ideas. I don't think informality ever helps you build a deeper social connection. And in the environments where it does, it's because you're overriding the actual point of that environment. When you're building a really good relationship with your teacher because you're chatting to them in class, you're not learning. learning what you need to be learning. There are some environments where formality is very useful for keeping people on topic and for keeping people focused. And environments when it's not, people are just never going to have to be so formal that they don't talk to other people. This material falls out of the debate. They tell you that when we're really competitive, we exacerbate tall poppy syndrome. First of all, I think as we tell you, we're not going to be really competitive. But second of all, I think you exacerbate, I think everyone is already competing in our model. They're just doing it silently. So they don't show that they're competing. They're trying to pretend like they're laid back, but they're still competing. What does this mean? One, it means they're just doing worse while they're competing, which is just bad for our economy. But two, and more importantly, they're still being competitive. They're still having all of the harms they say. That's where the tall poppy syndrome comes in. It's just that this norm makes it much, much easier for them to go and call out people who are successful, try and call them back in, like crabs in a bucket. When one tries to climb out, the other crabs pull him back down because they don't want other people to succeed because they are all secretly competing. So I think I'm just going to wipe away their ideas on personal success. The norm never has so much of an effect as to stop people wanting to have a family or wanting to be ambitious. It just affects how they compete and how they treat other people and what they find alienating. So on what they find alienating, we heard a disturbing lack of response to our very important cultural material. I tell you again, when people don't understand something, when they fear something, that is when you have cultural division. That is when they say, oh, I don't really know much about Māori culture. I don't like it that much because it is constantly annoying me. It is constantly having people ask me to do things. And that is when Māori people trying to get ahead stop asking to hold pōwhiris, stop introducing themselves with their mihi, and stop connecting with their culture. On that awesome note, I'll take a POI.
I think we see Māori culture can exist within these spaces. Can you engage with how our material on how when we now shift away from like this, we now cater to formality that is particularly that is Western formality.
Oh yeah.
Actively exclusive.
That Western formality right there. I think when people are raised in Western formality, that doesn't mean they suddenly hate all other cultures. It means they understand that there is a cultural requirement of formality. I think these ideas carry over very easily when Western formality looks like having a greeting party outside and Māori formality looks like having a pōwhiri outside. When Western formality looks like calling someone sir and Māori formality looks like calling someone the Māori version of sir. It's very simple and transgressive. People don't lose cultural appreciation. What they lose when they don't understand formality at all is the understanding that they need to not be afraid of it. So this is just really bad because it forces Māori people, if they want to be accepted, to forget their culture, to forget their heritage and their roots, which is a huge issue because it means that over time, especially as this compounds, as less and less people speak the language and the cultural practices are less and less used daily in the office, they erode, they disappear, and they're only kept by that small group at the top that still does welcoming committees for the government. That is a horribly dangerous harm, and that is something that extends to all of the other cultures that make up New Zealand, Indian culture, Chinese culture, that is also based on similar ideas to tradition. When we culturally alienate these people, we force them to make a choice. Either they never get ahead in life and they end up socio-economically disadvantaged like migrant communities in New Zealand because they don't abandon their culture, or they do abandon their culture. This is a huge harm they have to stand for. I don't.
I'd like to thank the speaker for their speech and invite up the second speaker of the occasion.
I don't think I've been to a single pōwhiri where the kaumātua hasn't cracked a couple jokes to get a few laughs. these things aren't that serious. We can be laid back while having it. We know this because porphyries exist in the status quo and we support them to a huge extent, right? But thirdly here, we think we're far more likely to integrate this kind of culture when we have less fear of failure, less fear of being judged by participating and falling back on our bums and looking like an idiot. But fourthly, look, we think that when people are laid back, they have time to spend on a porphyry and including people and making them feel good because we are informal and we do care about just relaxing and having a good time and enjoying each other's company. Look, firstly on tall poppy syndrome, then on ambition, then on our benefits, then on multiculture. So firstly on tall poppy syndrome. Look, firstly here, I just want to tell you that being laid back is not a logical precursor to criticizing people to the extent of impact that the affirming team gives you. It's completely irrational. They give us no structural reasoning why being laid back means you go around insulting people's life streams. That's a pretty significant harm that I don't think the average reasonable person is ever doing. But secondly, we think no, because you're far more focused on yourself, right? You want to balance your own life. You want to feel fulfilled. You have less need to criticize other people's lives. But also, if there's less pressure, then you feel less need to cut other people down because you yourself have less pressure to feel like you're succeeding. But thirdly, at least if we do exist in an informal norm, that it's less serious abuse, right? Like you're not actively insulting them. You're maybe just like making a small like comment that's like not really that deep. And also it's like less frequent because there's like a low pressure, which is a low incentive to do it. The comparative is you have a competitiveness which actively tells you to compete and play dirty and put other people down to put yourself ahead. We tell you at Layla that like capitalist incentives are a very, very large and very reasonable incentive for people to resort to this extreme level of ambition and competitiveness. So then on ambition, like they tell us that we stigmatize ambition on our side of the house. Firstly, no, because we have low pressure, which means people aren't competitive. But secondly, we think ambition still exists on our side of the house, right? It's unclear why you would want to attack something that you also have, right? What does ambition look like on our side then, to clarify? It looks like finding something you want to do and then finding a balance and being laid back about how you approach that. Why is this? Firstly, they tell us that people are inherently ambitious. Kids have goals, right? But secondly, humans need income, right? You're always going to have a career. You're always going to aspire to do something with your life to earn money to put food on the table. The only difference then is that we have norms that prioritize passion, choice, and low pressure. What this means is there's no reason to actively attack someone else's ambition because you too share it. And if anything, you probably admire the fact that they can take the time to have that ambition while having a family and while having a hobby. We think it's far more likely people are more supportive on our side of the house. But why is this better on our side? Firstly, we get more success, right? Because we are passionate, we work more effectively. Because we have balance, we have more capacity to do so without burning out. We tell you that on the affirming side of the house, people overcompensate because they see this norm being applied to other people's lives and think that they too have to push themselves to that level of success. That they have to wake up at 5 a.m. to go grind at the gym and then go to work until 10 and then like stay up doing work late. That is the world that you get on their side of the house because people feel like they have to overcompensate. What this means then is we're far more resilient on our side because we know that we can it's low pressure so we can fall back and keep trying, right? This is important because you're never going to achieve every goal in life, right? There are structural reasons why you just won't achieve everything, like whether it's bias or just like the fact that there is another person who is better than you, right? But secondly then, it's far more accessible, right? It's more subjective, it's more informal, and it's not based on just like shallow appearances. It's collaborative. People don't feel the need to alienate each other versus like on the comparative is you just give up and like you just or like you do like aspire and you like set up for failure when it doesn't come because you put all of your eggs in one basket. So then why is being informal more inclusive? Like they kind of give us a lot of material about like how we exclude minorities here. We reject this premise because you include people on a premise that isn't based on appearance, right? The counterfactual is being formal is a black and white, truly objective, single definition thing, right? You either say sir or you're not formal, right? So what this means is that you include everyone who doesn't say sir on our side of the house. We also tell you at Layla then how this like level of inclusion allows people the capacity to express their own identity and to form their own opinions, which I think is an important benefit that goes unengaged with at second affirming. But secondly, it's engaging, right? Being informal is something that is fun and enjoyable, easy to buy into. If you were an unengaged, low socioeconomic student, it is far easier to engage with your teacher by calling her Miss instead of Miss Connolly, sir. So then, look, let's just quickly cover some of the benefits that they don't really respond to. Why do we think a work-life balance is good? Firstly, you have a family and a social life. This is really important. You have time. You allocate time specifically towards this. There's no incentive to do so without this norm. But secondly, you just it just applies into all of your interactions, right? I think in a best case, this looks like how you raise your kid to be laid back, to be kind to everyone, to have a reasonable amount of ambition, but to not put too much pressure onto that, and to have low pressure. The comparative is you have tiger parents who overwork. Okay. I'll take a POI.
Why would I understand formality if I've been raised in an excessively informal culture?
Why would you understand formality? I don't know. You don't that. I don't know. It's just exists, right? You still have formal procedures, right? You still have an assembly. It just means at that assembly, your principal talks more casually and more colloquially. I think it's pretty reasonable to say people still have formalities. It's just how you interpret it. Okay, then on multiculture, this will be my substantive contribution. For context here, they tell us that multiculture is set on respect and formality. Yes, respect for family, environment, and spirituality. This is literally what the emphasis on work-life balance is. It is applying te whare tapa whā and making sure you have success in all areas of life as opposed to capitalist incentives. This is the way of life that appealed to English settlers and was adapted. This is the reason it exists in the first place. Okay, so then why is this culturally good? Firstly, it's unique to New Zealand, right? This is the reason so many people come to New Zealand. We get exchange students from Korea and Japan, or even America, who, as they say, still has some level of informality. But secondly, it's just important to the identity of New Zealand. Māori people, obviously, associate a lot of their identity with te whare tapa whā and their community, right? Which is an inherent part of being informal and prioritizing a work-life balance. So what does this mean? Firstly, we validate the culture of this people, right? It is far more uniquely accessible to Māori people because they have a better historical understanding of how to apply it. But also, secondary to this, I think it's just morally abhorrent to exclude people from their own culture and the original set of norms that existed before colonizers just came and took it over and tried to apply capitalist pressures and capitalist norms. But secondly, you just get a bigger sense of cultural unity, right? You're less likely to tear people down because you all share the same idea of informality, laying back and just having a good time and having a good life. Very proud to negate.
I'd like to thank the speaker for their speech and invite the third speaker to be Wellington.
Sorry about that. One thing I'd like to remind you before I get into the bulk of my speech is that I think on both sides people are inherently ambitious. The comparative here then is that on your side they feel forced to hide that ambition. They kind of hide it away and work it against each other in the back rooms, whereas on our side that ambition is propagated, it is respected, and that is a side that we are proud to stand for. Alright, so 2 things to focus on in my speech. Firstly is on individuality and culture, and then secondly is on the, I guess, economic impact that this actually has, which I think has largely been untouched. So firstly, on individuality and culture. Note that I'm kind of splitting this up into 2 distinct parts, individuality then culture. So firstly, on individuality, I think the first thing they tell you is that they give you a big push that people are forced to compete. Note that I think this is a substantial contingent in their case, which is largely asserted, because it's deeply unclear why, right? I would suggest that the normal thing is you just make a decision on how to act based on what you personally want. But I think secondly, the only reason why people are forced to compete is because they feel a sense of scarcity and opportunity. They feel as if there is not enough opportunity to go around. Because we tell you on our side, there probably is more opportunity under the economic side of things. We simply have more opportunity. There's less need to compete. There's more stuff to kind of go around. I think there's less competition. But I think the second thing is to say that it's deeply unclear why, even if there is competition, it's harmful, right? Because you probably just leave it at work. I think that we have norms of work-life balance which probably aren't contingent on this narrative. And I would just lastly say this isn't a trend you see overseas in formal cultures. So I think the next thing they tell you about is that you can express yourself more because there's less fear of judgment. The example they give you is like maybe you can wear a t-shirt instead. I think the issue is here that the type of judgment you see shifts, because on their side maybe you can get away with wearing a t-shirt, but you find it really strange when Māori are super formal in respecting their kaumatua, whereas on our side maybe you can't wear a t-shirt, but you probably respect that formality and you're probably used to it more. Note that I think the shift in judgment where you find certain cultures more harmful is uniquely harmful. I think it's something which is quite poor. Now, the last thing they tell you is that you develop hobbies and you get a work-life balance. My issue with this point is that this is a benefit which only impacts the highest and most well-off people in society. Because the low-paid jobs are where you have a ton of different candidates going for the same job. Employers can get away with providing a substantially lower pay rate and less time off. Whereas the higher-paying jobs will only then play into this narrative because they need to attract as much talent as they can. And just intuitively, right? Like Macca's workers still have to turn up on time, but maybe office workers can be slightly later. I think that's one issue. I think secondly is it's very nebulous when bosses choose to actually apply this narrative to their workplace. I think oftentimes it relies on having a personal relationship with your boss, or like a strong relationship with your boss, and that is probably propagated only if you are from the same culture, which oftentimes the most vulnerable people are kind of from different backgrounds than those higher up bosses. But I think lastly is that even if the benefits in theory in some respect flow down to the low paid workers, I think the issue is that they're probably too busy working additional shifts to find time to get a hobby. They're probably too busy. They could probably never take time off because they're so busy working they don't have any money. I think that the work-life balance point just kind of isn't very impactful because it only impacts such a small percentage of the population. What we tell you then you should care about is culture. Note that we weigh this highly, firstly because it obviously applies to literally everyone. Everyone has their own culture. But secondly is because culture is something very personal to people and therefore they're quite vulnerable when they feel it isn't respected. I think the push we give you here is that is that you can never truly understand a culture without being able to engage in the formalities of it. That is to say that maybe your principal in assembly tries to say kia ora and tries to do some tikanga stuff, but because you're not used to that formality, it's just really foreign to you and you don't understand it. I think that the only small push that they give you is that Māori people value some form of work-life balance. I think, look, we've already kind of attacked work-life balance, but I think secondly, what they value is respecting the elders. That is something which is inherently a formality. That's like a major part of their culture. You only do that when you are super formal. I think that you only, they value unique, very formal kind of cultural performances which pay respect to ancestors. I think that is something which is not respected on their side of the house because it's not a cultural norm to be formal in the way that you act. So I think at the end of that point, what you ought to believe, firstly, is that there is no substantial benefit to individuality on their side of the house, at least the most vulnerable people that we care about in this debate. I think secondly, what you ought to believe is that culture is therefore what you should choose this individuality cultural clash on, and culture is far worse on their side because people are not used to engaging in the formalities of those cultures. It seems quite foreign to them, even if they do try to engage in a minute on both sides. Go ahead. Okay, sorry.
What happens to kids who don't have the ability to engage in formality on either side?
I think that's probably quite symmetrical. I mean, I think on our side, you probably are more used to that formality. You probably try to engage with it more. But I think I'm not sure where that's going, sorry. Right. You value the cultural aspect of it more on our side. You value the formalities, noticing that these cultures are very rich in formalities. That's definitely a better thing for our side. Now on the, economics of this debate. What do they tell you? They tell you that, we tell you that tall poppy syndrome results from this narrative because people are inherently ambitious. That is to say that on both sides, people are always trying to get ahead. They are always trying to, improve their standing or to get a better job. Because no one wants to be stuck in the same job their entire life. I think what we tell you at Michael is that the comparative here is that people, under this culture, people aren't respected for having ambition, and it becomes a bit of the only kind of push they give you here on why the economy is, not so bad on our side of the house is because of the idea that people can pursue their own passions. Note that this is only a benefit that ever applies to the people who had the resources to do that in the first place. As I kind of said in the original point, I think probably what you weigh higher under the economics point is people just trying to work their way up the workplace. They never respond to the mix we give you at James, which is that you make appointments more based on the way you fit into the culture at work versus the procedure and the merits. Oftentimes, people from these vulnerable backgrounds aren't able to get along with the bosses so much due to those cultural differences, and therefore the only way for them to progress and improve is on our side, where you value formality first. Proud to affirm.
I'd like to thank you for this speech and invite up the third speaker of the evening.
As a McDonald's employee myself, yes, I understand the importance of showing up on time, but I can also appreciate the fact that my boss is laid back enough that if I have school that finishes at 3:30 and a shift that starts at 3:45, they can understand that I know I cannot be there exactly at 3:45. Maybe I'll be 5 minutes late. It's not such a formal environment where I'm going to be fired for doing this. This is where where this formal pressure is put on, this is where jobs become inaccessible to people. The time where alienation happens is when areas become so formal that the barrier of entry is so high it's no longer accessible to anyone but overly privileged people that were already raised in this culture. And we're going through 2 points of clash, first on success and then on minorities. So firstly for success, they said that ambition is stigmatized and people no longer support people, so no one achieves anything. Firstly, I'd like to point out how they themselves said that everyone's competitive anyway. I think this just means that people are going to be striving to achieve, and if everyone's secretly competitive and going against each other on our side of the debate, then it's likely people are still ambitious and trying to achieve their goals. So then firstly, it's just unlikely it's that extreme. If you tell someone you want to be a doctor in a laid-back culture, they're not going to say, you can't do that. The stigma was not properly explained. Laid-back culture actually just means prioritizing balance. It does not mean that thinking everyone should just bum around. It does not mean because I I'm more laid back and I'm going to prioritize my hobbies over my work, so should everyone else. It doesn't mean that. This is not a fair characterization. It's still a capitalist society. You still need a job, and everyone can appreciate that. And no one's going to come up to me and say oh, I think you're weird for working at McDonald's and trying to earn money. People understand that things cost money and you need a job. And then not wanting to be prime minister, you're probably going to get judged either side. This is symmetrical. If someone comes up and tells me they want to be prime minister, I might not judge them, but someone else that sees that is kind of unrealistic. There was only one prime minister of New Zealand. That's probably fair, and anyone that is going to judge that, they're going to do it either side. So what is the actual response? It looks like your family encouraging you to not burn out when you're pursuing something like medicine. Balance is so much more important than not being judged. This looks like your family stopping you from overdoing it and burning out. When you burn out, you now can't go further. You lose interest in medicine because you're why am I trying to do this thing when all my friends are out having fun while studying? I'm stuck in my room doing flashcards until 2 a.m. This is when you no longer care about medicine. You care about the fact that your life sort of just sucks, and you're why did no one push me to take more time for myself? And it looks like you, and the worst, you give up and you never achieve what you want, or you just, keep going. You have no personal life, you have no personal fulfillment, and you've got no work-life balance. This is going to catch up to you in 10 years. When you look around, you're I've got no friends, I've got no family, I have no support system, and I'm working this job I don't really like anymore. The comparative is just, more pressure. This looks like your parents pushing you to be overly ambitious because they view career success as one of the most important things over balancing what you actually want. What does this mean? You have a job you don't like, this gives you no fulfillment and you're distressed, this is a huge harm. Or because you don't have balance because you're just not encouraged to prioritize other things, this still means you burn out. And even if you still believe this harm, it doesn't matter. Firstly, the benefits of a work-life balance are so much more severe than any harms of becoming a lawyer over prime minister because your mum didn't tell you could do anything you wanted to. And note that this is our worst case. Likely if you have a severe passion for wanting to be prime minister, you're gonna achieve it either way. The other team conceded that people are still ambitious on both sides. This means that you just prioritize balance because while you're secretly working to try and become prime minister, other people encouraging you to go out with your friends. This just means that while you're achieving what you want, you're still hanging out with your friends. This means you have personal fulfillment, you have a family, you have hobbies, you can travel, and you're not burning out. Then they said that they said that everyone's secretly competitive. This just means you're gonna achieve what you want anyway. This is better on our side, but then you just also balance. And then they said that you need to be formal in order to achieve. If a teacher's too nice to their students, then they're not gonna achieve anything. I think this is just blatantly untrue. I don't need to call my teacher Miss Connolly for her to teach me chemistry. I don't need to use the biggest words possible to convince you that informality contributes to actual success. So how does it build success? It's just more relaxed. There's no scary teacher or boss breathing down your neck when you're trying to do your work. This means that you're more open to making mistakes because you understand your teacher is a person too. When your teacher comes into the class complaining about how they're tired and traffic was bad, you feel like they're an actual person, you relate to them. This is where you're not afraid to make mistakes because you can have a laugh with them. You can make jokes because it's just not that serious. This means there's a better environment. If you've had an awful day, your teacher can just make a joke, or your teacher can ask you how you are. You don't need to refer to them as sir and sit in rows the whole time in class. You can talk to people around you. You can have encouragement from other people. The comparative, you feel stressed, you're not supported, and you don't relate to your teacher. You don't care what your teacher has to say, and you don't have that much ambition to carry on. So then they said, I'll take your POI.
Is New Zealand, with this laid-back culture, the only country in the world where teachers can have conversations with their students?
I'm pretty sure you guys said on your side that it's not good for teachers to have conversations, but even if they're having some conversations, if those conversations like involved like revolving around like being overly formal, you're still having to call them sir. You're still like not considering like other connections you may have, like movies or TV shows you both like, other ways you can connect outside of the classroom. This is when you don't relate to the teacher. It doesn't matter if you have a conversation about the weather, you don't care about that. You don't care if it's raining or sunny outside. Like these pretend like informalities where you pretend to make a connection. This doesn't help you. This is like not where you can connect and relate to your teacher. Okay, on minorities, they said the Māori culture is formal, so like it promotes like a culture of like understanding this. Like saying that people won't do a porphyry is completely uncharitable. We support the status quo where this is literally done. This was said at Ollie, and like in an increasingly Eurocentric country where Māori words are being banned in certain spaces, when you become more formal, I like severely doubt this is going to be in favor of Māori culture. It's going to, like Layla said at first, this is a European version of formality where Māori culture is squashed and pushed to the side to benefit like British people. This looks like having to call your teacher sir, or like seeing it as gross when you see people not wearing shoes, despite this fact that this is like a part of Māori culture. This is where culture is raised. This is more harmful than an already racist person not like educating themselves. Note that like the characterization of like a racist person educating themselves is probably symmetrical at best, because an uneducated racist person isn't going to go and like educate themselves on Māori culture just because they're encouraged to be formal. This doesn't make any sense. Racist people are racist either side. They said that you're going to judge Māori culture because you like wear a t-shirt and not a suit, and Māori people are more formal. This is just like blatantly untrue. What's actually true is that you go and you wear your suit to work, and then you see a haka being performed with men not wearing any shirts, and you're like, wow, that's so gross and informal. I don't relate to that. I personally go to work in a suit. I'm better than these people. This is where racism is like encouraged. So then they said that, like, they did this weird POI about, like, how you're supposed to understand formality when you're not raised in a formal culture. This just proves our point. Why is this so bad? Minorities can no longer enter spaces like debate nationals. As soon as debate nationals banned, like, brain rot words or like, informalities, minorities or people that aren't raised in this culture can no longer come. They no longer, like people that can't speak super eloquently, and it's no longer accessible to them, so they aren't there. This means that the only empowered people are those people that are raised super formally. It is those super privileged, like, Eurocentric people. This excludes minorities from professional spaces. The only people then, like, in parliament, are the ones raised in those culture. Benefits to minorities only happen when they're actually included in high up spaces, such as parliament. We win when we don't care if someone knows, like, the formal title for a minister. We actually value the words that come out of their mouth. We value the intent behind them, and this is where we actually support minorities and get better outcomes for both them and the general success of people in New Zealand.
I'd like to thank the speaker for their speech, and as is customary, reverse the speaking order and invite up the reply speaker.
So my speech on the go. When youth are bashed by their friends because they don't know some niche formal vocabulary, that is a real harm, and that is when you exclude people from having an identity and enjoying a fulfilled life. That is the entire purpose of existing, so we think that should be the most beneficial impact of this debate. So firstly on tall poppy syndrome, then ambition, then culture, then inclusion. Look, firstly on tall poppy syndrome, note that this is kind of the only significant harm they give us and what they build most of their case around. Look, I think we give you sufficient structural responses down the line, but I just want to point out they contradict the like exclusiveness of this argument when they tell you that you just choose to not be competitive based on what you want and you leave it in the workplace. At that point, why can you not just choose to not participate in tall poppy syndrome? We give you unique reasons down the line why being competitive gives you an active incentive to degrade other people in order to get yourself ahead. Whereas we have the ability to collaborate on our side when we feel less pressure to succeed and put ourselves above others. So then on ambition, look, I think this is probably the most important point of clash, because it's like we win at every point here and we guarantee success, and they never respond to the other benefits here. Look, even we think that we have the same existing ambition, but with more balance and more applicable to people's lives. But even if they do win here and they have more ambition to succeed, they don't succeed because people burn out at an unfulfilling job where they work 9 to 5 and just suffer and never get to have fun with their family or have fun with their friends. Not how fulfilling it is to go out with your friends and have a laugh together, but also they have no support because you have this system that is inherently too competitive. You alienate everyone around you. But most importantly, you just give up when failure naturally comes, right? Because you can't deal with the fact that you haven't succeeded because there's too much pressure. What this means is you exclude minorities who are the most likely to face structural bias and who are the most likely to fail at some point. Or the other possible scenario is that these people just don't even try to begin with because they fear failure so severely. Look, these are the impacts we give you from Layla, and I don't think they engage enough here down the line because I think that's really important. But even if they do get more success, we still touch grass and have hobbies on our side of the house, which is inherently fulfilling. We still have time for family to raise our kids and see them grow and succeed in life. I think that's very fulfilling. We still have time to go out and have a conversation with our friends about how we view the world and grow our knowledge and meet people and make connections. We tell you at Layla we are inherently social beings. That's a really important impact then. So then on culture, look, respecting elders and tipuna is literally, definitionally about family and spirituality. They never engage here then, that this is literally what work-life balance is about. Māori is not neurotypically formal, right? People dance around without their shirts on. That is you're inherently enabling, making them assimilate on their side. But also secondly here, even without this benefit, we still have the benefit of New Zealand identity insofar as that we all support the same informal language. You can go out and say chur to anyone and they know what it means. You can never say chur to a Spanish person. They wouldn't understand. Okay, then on inclusion. Look, we tell you firstly it's accessible. You can bond over triple T no matter what language you come from. But secondly, it's engaging, right? Formality does not equal learning. Informality equals interesting, and time for friendliness makes more productive rest of the time. Thirdly, it's inclusive to people who need it. Māori or other spiritualities that emphasize spiritual balance are more included. The rising of Western formality actively excludes them on the negating side of the house when this norm doesn't exist. This looks like disenfranchising unengaged youth in class. Without these benefits, you just exclude people more. You continue to disenfranchise people. I think we win at every point in this debate. I think the margin is pretty clear.
I'd like to thank the speaker for their speech and invite them to reply to the affirmative team to conclude the debate.
Logically, what am I going to do there? Am I going to go? I think it's very important that you note that throughout the entire Next Team case, I think most egregiously at Neg Block, they've made the mistake of conflating formality with just a bunch of other narratives which we don't believe fit into it. Mainly they're just trying to say that everyone's going to be English under our side of the house. That is not what we stand for. That is not what this debate is about. 2 points. There were 2 points of class that I'll cover in my leader's reply just at the moment. Okay, firstly, what are the impacts on our individuals, on our success, and on our ambition? And then secondly, what are the impacts on culture and inclusion of Maori and also other cultures that come from overseas. So firstly, on the impact about individuals. I think both sides tend to agree in this debate that ambition is something that is inherent in everyone. Everyone wants to be ambitious. However, why do we think that it is different under our side of the house? So when we don't have this formality, what happens when we have this informality with regards to our ambition? Firstly, I think, as Michael tells you, you do not announce your ambition to anybody. You're never told that you should announce your ambition to anyone. Instead, what you have to do is you put on a facade in which you pull other people down for having this ambition. We establish that these are the cultural norms that you have. Secondly, we tell you that that the cultural norm creates the idea that ambition does not equal hard work. We tell you that, and note, Second egg tells us that most people do not succeed in what they do. So we believe that most people end up kind of falling into mediocrity in their lives. So we believe that most of these people aren't successful. We believe this creates envy when you believe that those people who have been successful have done so because they worked hard and they've gone against the cultural norms. They're different, they're unique. We believe, this links to the third thing that we have here, that just when you go against a societal norm that you see in a country that tends to be different, people tend to look at you a bit weird or a bit bizarre, and as we will see, a bit worse. And these bit worse things, it looks like shouting at someone across the street when they're famous or they're successful. It looks like sending them an angry message which they take and they internalize, and they believe it's a problem with them. We believe it looks like hiding behind the fact that Jacinda Ardern is a woman to compensate for the fact, hiding behind the fact that Jacinda Ardern is a woman to criticize her for all that this is, for her success in life. We believe that this is what it looks like. It looks like you live a life of hate under their side of the house, where you are envious of other people, with the mental harms of living that life. It's just so extreme. It's something that you should weigh so highly in this debate. Note here we have the scale that we talk about, that again, we believe everyone is doing these things under our side of the house. And then secondly, note the potential that a lot of people give up when they do these things. What do we hear in response or on individuals from the next side of the house? We hear about work-life balance. We hear about still, you're just going to have a family now, that you've got to still have a family somehow because we don't have that on our side of the house apparently, and you spend time with them. Now here again, we hear this mischaracterization where they take this to the absolute extreme. We believe like the United Kingdom, you still have a family, you still spend time with your family, in the United Kingdom, the United States, and even in really aggressive, high oppressor cultures. And note, we also believe in their world, you just give up on the idea that you ameliorate your family's position. You give up on the idea that you want to make your family do better in life. We believe you don't have that. We believe under their side of the house, when you never take the risk, when you never take the leap to do better under their side of the house, you just feel a whole lot worse about yourself in your day-to-day life. We believe that even if you are a bit more burnt out under their side of the house, you're far more likely to be in a better position financially. You're far happier mentally because you did all you could, you did all that you could, and that you do not have that weighing on your burden, on your mind. We really should weigh that so highly in this debate. Secondly, on the impact on culture and on conclusion. We believe we tell you about value culture. Now again, here note this mischaracterization of what we're actually trying to tell you happens here. We tell you, at first and down the case, that when you have a culture that is used to formality, it is so much easier to make space for another culture's formalities and things that they do. We are not saying that when you wear a suit, you're going to be somehow far more likely to understand value culture. We believe that's a mischaracterization they give. When you have a formal greeting in the United Kingdom, for example, when you go to a conference, you're far more likely to be able to have a potpourri. We also believe that this has happened over time. We believe Maori culture has been eroded for these reasons. We believe that is something that they have to stand for under their side of the house, in which they aren't able to do this, in which Maori people cannot express themselves, could not express themselves, which is why we see Maori culture being eroded over time. That is why I'm proud to affirm.
I'd like to thank you for their speech and all speakers for this thoroughly enjoyable debate. I think across the board and to ask everybody to leave the room while it goes.
As a note, being a panel of 3 judges, I will not expect a decision within 20 minutes. It is likely to be closer to 25 to find this one. I recommend you go get lunch. It's in the same place as last time.
Well,